Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to another episode of Tiny Keyhole Minis. It is time for me to step away from the Josephine house for the next couple months. Over the fall time, I need to focus on my upcoming projects. For the month of September, I will be working on the pet cemetery. And for the month of October, I will be working on a special project that today's project will be going into. I love the fabric on this. It's kind of like this stretchy fabric, almost kind of like a stretchy leather. There is a liner inside, so it makes it feel quite like stretchy leather. So, what could I possibly be doing with this old vintage lampshade that has been sitting in my garage and just collecting dust because we no longer use it? Well, that is a good question because that is going to be today's project. I have a wonderful idea of how I can recycle this lampshade. So I have taken it apart and it is not stretchy leather, it is vinyl, like shower curtain. Reminds me of the costumes that we would wear when I was a kid back in the 80s. So that is what it really is. But it's going to be perfect. I'm glad it's not that crispy plastic paper that lampshades are made of because this vinyl is pretty stretchy. Today I'll be using this to make 1970s lamps. So I need to pull out all my little metal tidbits to try and come up with the post for these lamps. I'm going to play around and see what I can come up with, try out some new things, see what works, what doesn't work, and figure this out so I can put these pieces together. Now, I was thinking about using one of these bead caps and just kind of maybe flattening them just to see what that looked like. But that's not going to work because the lamps that I need to make have more of a rounder base. So I pulled out some buttons and I need to make 3 lamps. I had 3 of the red buttons and I've taken one apart. I'm going to use the silver piece, which is actually the bottom to the button. I've taken them apart and they're aluminum, I believe. They're very thin. I need to poke a hole in the middle so that I can feed the wire through to hold the beads. And I did try using my hand drill, but it wasn't working out very well. It was easier just to poke through with my sharp poker tool. And I have misshapen a couple of these trying to take them apart. So I was just rolling it around to try and get the shape back a little more so it's not too noticeable. But the poker tool works really well. It just pokes right through. And the hole will actually be necessary so that I can feed the wire through instead of a jewelry pin or bead pin. There are already a couple holes in these button bottoms, but they're not going to be very noticeable once I'm done with them. So I'm not too worried about those at all. For the post on this, I'm going to use my Metal Shapes by K&S. And I'm not sure if this one is actually this size because I have used several and then just threw them in the packages. But you can see they're fairly cheap from my local hobby store. They're much more expensive online. But I believe this is the biggest one I have, and it's going to work perfectly fine. I'm just going to cut pieces off. So right now I am just kind of putting these beads together to see how I want to place them, and I'm going to use this wire that I have. I'm just going to cut down a size and I'll cut off any excess later on. These lamps are going to be tabletop lamps, so I'm really not sure how tall I'm going to need them to be until I start building, but I don't want them to be too tall. But I rather have more than enough than not enough. So for the very bottom, I'm just going to loop it around to make a little loop, squeeze it nice and tight, and that'll lock this piece into place from sliding through the hole. So I'll just glue that right into place. Now I've cut down my pieces from my metal shapes, and they're roughly about 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to use my Aleene's jewelry and metal glue, and I'm just going to put a little dab on the bottom. A viewer once shared with me that rule of thumb is 16 seconds. So ever since I read that comment, I have been counting 16 seconds when I'm using my super glue or any type of glue, and it actually works. So 16 seconds it is. I figured out how I want my beads to be placed on my post, so I'm going to go ahead and start attaching them. I am using the glue in between each bead. So this is what it's going to look like. And now I have to make 2 more. So again, I'm just going in with my glue and my beads. I have them all lined up so I know what order they're going to go in. I'm using this tiny little grommet just to make it look like a straight post in between these 2 bottom beads. Okay, I have 2 down, and you can see what they're looking like as a pair. And now I got all 3 done, and I can move on to the lampshade. So for the lampshade, I cut a piece of cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 1 1/4, and I'm just going to round it off and attach it to itself. I just want to make sure that it's going to be a good size and fit with the post before I move on to the next step. So I've cut my pieces down from the lampshade, and I am using a thin layer of tacky glue just along the edges or the sides. And I'm just going to fold over the vinyl and glue it down. Super simple, nothing complex. I really love this vinyl because it already has that vintage 70s look. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And the tacky glue works really well with this vinyl. I was using fabric tack, and it just was not working out very well. So the tacky glue was a go-to for this. I'm making sure to pull the vinyl super tight as I'm gluing it down. And now I'm just going to put some weight on it while I work on the next one. Once these pieces were nice and secure, I went ahead and snipped the corners off of the ends. And I'm using tacky glue to just fold them over and glue them down. I'm only doing this step to one end of each shade. For the other end, I'm actually going to attach it and glue it down. So a little bit different for this end. I'm just going to line it up, add some glue, and secure them closed. I decided not to fold this end over like I did the other end because when I close the shade, it makes it a little more bulky and it just has a bulky seam. And I didn't like the way that looked. So I decided to leave it open and just glue it down nice and flat. It gave it a thinner seam and I didn't mind the way that it looked. So I went with this instead. I did try it the other way, but I just didn't like how bulky the seam was, and this worked out. So I left this end open and just glued it shut. Now I am going to go with Aira's little paper bandage trick, and I just cut a small strip. I'm adding a thin layer of glue, and this is actually going to go on the inside where the seam is, just for added security. And you'll be able to see it a little bit, but once I put these on display and put them into the project, you shouldn't see it. So there is the lampshade. I'm just finishing up this last one in the same way. Okay, now my lampshades are done. I need to figure out how I'm going to attach these to the bases. They're going to be non-working lights, and I need to figure out how they're going to sit on their posts. So I came up with this piece of wire that I kind of just manipulated to a round shape, and then it has like a middle piece that will sit on the base. I kind of have it twisted around that piece of wire so that the wire slips through and is nice and snug without having the wire actually wrap around it. So it's a little hard to explain, but uh, that's just what I came up with. So I'm going to go ahead and make this one, and you'll see what that entails. I'm going to speed up this process. So looping it on the end so it can sit on the wire that's attached to the base. And here we go. Okay, so in real life, that really wasn't as fun as it looked. I sped that up 7 times and cut it shorter, so it took a lot longer to try and figure this out. And it was just a lot of back and forth with the shade to fit it. But you can see that the wire wraps around the straight wire piece nice and snug without actually wrapping the wire around it tightly. And then the shade just slips on, and I can just adjust it to straighten it, and it fits nice and snug. So there it is. Okay, now these lights are going to be non-working because I am going to try and put some working lights into the project, but I don't want to focus on the area these lights are going on. The main focus of the project will be another part of the project. So now it's time to paint them so that they all can be the same color. And I do love the color of these beads because they do have that antique gold color with the black coming through. But I need to make them look all like one piece. So I'm going to start with a base coat of black chalk paint. And I don't have to cover them completely because I am going to go over them with gold. And these are mostly gold except for the base. So I'm just giving them a thin coat of the black. I just want to show you what I did really quickly. The bottom bases are hollow, so I filled them in with some hot glue and then I placed them on some wax paper so that they can flatten out and then I can peel them off. This way I'll have something there to glue them down when it's time to put them in the project. The wire that's in there sticks out a little further than I would like, so I couldn't add a piece of wood or paper or anything to it. So I just filled it with hot glue, and hopefully that'll work later on. I might have to cover it up with paper. We'll see. So that was my solution to fill those hollow bottoms in. So now I'm going to give them a nice coat of antique gold rub and buff. And I do have antique gold metallic acrylic paint, but I really like using this rub and buff. So I'm just going to use it any chance I can get or any opportunity that comes about. It's just a more vibrant, brighter, I would say richer gold. Once that's dried, I am going to go back in and tone it down just a little bit with some chalk paste, which is really just chalk pastels and a little bit of water. And I'm doing this very lightly because I don't really want to age them like I would normally go about. I don't want them to look old aged, but I do want them to have a more of an antique look like the beads originally looked. So I'm just going to add a little bit of black around the base and the beads to bring out the detail a little more. This step just takes it up another notch and gives it a little more realism. I like to go in after each application with a cotton swab just to remove some of the excess water, or if it's a little bit too dark, it just helps lighten it up a little bit. To finish these off, I'm going to give them 2 coats of satin varnish by Duraclear, and this will help restore some of that shine in the metal and make them look a little more like a metal piece, even though they are metal. After all that paint, it kind of dulls it down. Okay, I've already glued down the other 2 supports, so last I have to glue this support down, and I'm just going to use my Aleene's Jewelry and Metal Glue and just add a little bit to the top of this post and then glue that support right into place. There's no need to glue the shades onto the support because they fit so snug, and I didn't want to have to glue them down, but it worked out that way. And now I'm going to carefully slip this shade on. I would really like to take the opportunity right now to thank those of you that have purchased my kits. I only listed 4. I did not expect them to go so quickly, and they all sold right away. So if you want one of those shelf kits and you missed out, do not worry. I will have more listed very soon, and I will post a community tab to let you all know when they are listed again. For those of you that have purchased and those wanting to purchase when they're relisted, I hope you really love them and have fun with them. And I'm so glad that I was able to share those and put those out for you guys. Okay, so there are my 3 retro lamps from the 70s that I made from a recycled lampshade. These lamps are going to go into a super fun special project, and I will be working on pieces up until it's time to put it all together. So stay tuned for that. That completes today's project, and I hope you all have enjoyed it. If you have, please don't forget to hit that like button and give it a thumbs up. And let me know what you think about these retro lamps in the comments below. As always, I'd like to thank you all for subscribing and watching. And welcome to all my new subscribers. Thank you all so much for your support. If this is your first time visiting my channel and would like to see more of my miniature projects, please hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit the top bell notification button to be notified every time I upload a new project so you don't miss out. Don't worry, I'll be back to the Josephine house before you know it. And I would also like to work on another retail doll because there is another one begging to be made. So I'm going to try and focus on that as well. I have lots of fun projects coming up in the meantime. So until next time, tiny friends, I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will see you all on the mini side. Bye bye.